Good day. Welcome to our pre-recorded Think Ethics Q&A session. I'm Janique Oliver and a freelancer for good. My brand, Community Creative, partners with nonprofit organizations to direct their creative approach. And today I'm privileged to interview Ezrah's Managing Director, Mariëtte Jacobs. Mariëtte, you have committed yourself to ethical service delivery and quality education for communities. If you don't mind sharing a little bit about your experience in the NPO space thus far, and specifically about being an NPO leader.
Yeah, thank you, Janique, for this opportunity to share a little bit more about my role within the NPO sector and also my passion for ethics. So I've been the co-founder and managing director of Ezrah Community Training and Development for the past 10 years. And prior to that, I had also additional experience in consulting within the NPO space. So the NPO sector is really very close to my heart. And therefore, it's such a privilege to come alongside other NPOs to strengthen their ethical service delivery, especially as it relates to children.
Thank you so much. And since we're going to dive into ethics in the nonprofit world, could you please describe ethics for us?
So ethics in its most basic form is a commitment to doing the right thing, even when no one is watching. I love that definition because it's really simplistic and it really captures the heart of what ethics is all about.
No, definitely. Ezrah Community Training and Development offers training and support to organizations working in child protection specifically. You maybe give an example or share about what you've observed from the potential gap in foundational structures and how would ethics play a role?
Yeah, definitely. So what I've noticed in working with different NPOs is that people also pretty much have a heart for working with vulnerable people. They love serving communities. They love the service delivery side of things. And often people don't think a lot about the ethical lenses through which service delivery must be done, or even ethical governance or ethical financial management. So it's not a topic that's very popular or a topic that people like to discuss. What I've noticed, for example, is that often people will just assume and say, we are an ethical organization, our things are in place. And what they are referring to is that the legal compliance may be in place. Maybe they are registered as a nonprofit organization and they have bookkeeping systems. They are doing audits on their financial statements. And maybe other things that they perceive as being important in terms of legal compliance. But then they misunderstand that ethics is far beyond just legal compliance. Ethics is, like I said, really a commitment to do the right thing, even when no one is watching. So ethics goes beyond legal compliance, and it is really a commitment to serve the best interest of your beneficiaries first and foremost. So I would say at the heart of ethics in the nonprofit sector is putting your beneficiaries at the center of your planning. So everything you plan, everything you do, your way you evaluate, even the way that you do monitoring and evaluation, you must go back in this question of how is this actually impacting our beneficiaries? Is what we are doing really, really addressing their needs? Is it building on their strengths? Do we actually address the challenges that our beneficiaries are experiencing? There are also other areas like leadership, governance, administration, financial management, where ethics should also come into play.
Thank you, Maria. That's very insightful. And I actually want to follow on that. As a leader yourself, what role do you think ethics play in the safe governing of an organization? And how, for Ezrah, have you implemented ethical frameworks?
So what I've noticed as well is that if the leadership of an organization is not absolutely committed to intentionally put ethics at the center of the organization, it will not happen automatically. Maybe you're a faith-based organization, and because of that, you may make the assumption that everyone will just do the right thing. But ethical maturity is actually a process of growth where you intentionally need to create awareness around ethics. You need to train your staff. You need to equip your board in terms of thinking ethically around governance issues. And then you need to follow up. You need to make ethical discussions part of your board meetings, part of your staff meetings, part of just the daily operations within the organizations. So as an NPO leader within Ezrah Community Training and Development, we as a board are very fortunate that we value ethics very highly. And so the first thing we've done is we've actually put ethics as a standing agenda at all board meetings. So this is something that we circle back all the time. We have appointed a risk and ethics officer, and our risk and ethics officer will highlight any ethical concerns that he picks up, either in our engagement with stakeholders, or in our service delivery, or in any other area of our functioning. So I would just say it's basically a commitment to really just focus on ethics, being intentional about it, and making it part of the daily operations of the organization.
I completely agree. And I love what you said that you need ethical maturity, and maturity in any category needs continuous efforts and commitment to growing in that area. Can you also explain or give an example of what would be included in an ethical framework, and maybe also share about the risk of not having any ethical frameworks in place?
So I think where an ethical framework comes into play, maybe at two levels. First, it's in your planning phase. So it's where you need to make decisions. Ethical framework is basically a framework that has different steps that will help you to look at the values of the organizations, the principles of the organizations, and also how you incorporate your code of ethics within your decision-making process. Secondly, an ethical framework will also help you that when the board or the leadership of an organization encounters an ethical challenge, they have a framework which may be a step-by-step process where you look at your values, you look at your principles, you look at legal obligations, you look at the impact of different decision outcomes on the different stakeholders, like the beneficiaries, your donors even, your partners, your collaborators. And it gives you kind of a roadmap almost to implement decision-making and to be accountable in how that decision-making actually impacts all the stakeholders related to the organization.
Thank you again. It's really important to actually make sure that not only do you have something in place, but that you also follow through on implementing that ethical framework throughout and continually within every department of the organization. Can you advise on any measures that are foundational to an ethical framework, something that you think an organization cannot sustainably function without?
I think first and foremost, an NPO must have a type of code of ethics that I described to. So the difference between a code of ethics and a code of conduct is almost like a list of behavior that is desirable and a list of behavior that has certain consequences that the NPO does not want to allow within the organization. But a code of ethics is different in that it is a summary of the most important values, the leadership model of the organization, the principles that the organization stands for. So you get different types of code of ethics. There are examples of code of ethics that the NPO can subscribe to. But ultimately, I think it is very wise to develop contextualized code of ethics for the NPO so that the board knows exactly the true north, the vision, mission, and really just the way we plan and operate. All of those things are aligned with our values and principles.
Thank you. I can see that it's quite an essential part of governing an organization. You share of any instances where you engage with organizations where best practices were implemented and how that was different to engaging with NPOs that didn't follow best practices, if you've encountered any?
That's quite a difficult question because actually ethics gets tested during challenging seasons. So often you can work and journey with a nonprofit organization, and then it looks like the ethics is in place, but when financial challenges hit or when there's some pressure on the organization, then you can see the cracks starting to appear. I think really the test is the challenging seasons and the feedback that the stakeholders around the organization will give back to the leadership within that season.
And do you find yourself being very strict when you potentially identify ethical cracks in organizations you're working with? And what would you recommend for organizations working in collaboration or partnership, where one of the organizations might run into those challenges and some ethical cracks arise?
That's quite an important question. So I think authentic relationship, honest relationship is really very important. So in building collaboration, take time to build relationship to make sure that values and ethics are aligned. You can even implement those in the service level agreements. So continuous communication is very important so that when you pick up early on an ethical misalignment, that you can go back to that organization and say, can we talk about this? This is what we are seeing. This is maybe where we are in disagreement. So sometimes organizations will, from that conversation, adapt their way of thinking or implementing, and that will strengthen the collaboration. Unfortunately, in some cases, the other collaborator or partner may not see eye to eye on that particular situation. And then it's just a matter of determining how important that issue really is. So is it something that you can navigate around, or in some cases when you perceive that situation to be too much of a misalignment, then you need to exit that partnership or collaboration, but only after you've done all that you could do to communicate, to mediate, and to find a resolution in moving forward.
Do you think there's anything else you'd like to share on the topic of ethics with our audience?
Yeah, I would really just encourage NPOs out there to put ethics on your agenda, because it's so important not to assume that ethics is in place. There are a lot of risk factors associated with the lack of ethics. It can be financial risk, but it has a lot to do with the reputation of the organization. It has a lot to do with relationships, because ultimately a thriving nonprofit organization has trusting relationships. So in Ezrah Community Training and Development, we realized, although there are fantastic ethical resources out there, there's not always a lot for nonprofit organizations specifically. And that's why we have developed our Think Ethics online course that organizations can do. Included in this course is an ebook that is very comprehensive in nature, that explains all the different concepts with examples, with case studies. And it's a step-by-step course that also takes organizations through a self-assessment and helps them to track their progress in terms of implementing ethical application within the organization.
Thank you so much, Mariëtte. You've offered insightful responses and also addressed a topic that is a gap in the NPO world. And I think it's so important for leaders to consider and to even go and evaluate what is in place in their organization and see what's missing and how we can better serve our communities, specifically our beneficiaries. If you want to know more, our Think Ethics online course is available on the Ezrah website. And please follow us on social media to keep up to date, and there'll be more opportunities to engage with Think Ethics. Thank you.
Thank you, Janique. I so appreciate the opportunity.